So I'm at the Race to the King. That's the start behind me. It's been raining. The sun has been out up until now, so it's going to be a bit sloppy out there, I reckon. And today I'm going to be testing the inov-8 TrailFly G300. While I'm padding up this big hill, 10 miles into the 50, past the first pit stop, thought I'd just stop and give you a little take on how the shoes have gone so far. They are running like a dream, basically, exactly like I used them in that 3-hour run. This has been a mixture of sort of slightly slippy top mud. There's some grassy fields, some muddy fields, some roads, bits of compacted trails, free routes, all that usual stuff, and the G300s have just eaten them up. So far they're super comfortable. No problems on the feet. We are 10 miles in though, there's a long way to go. I'm really interested to see what happens when I go beyond what I did before into those sort of latter hours, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours when frankly everything else hurts a bit more and the shoes start to make a big difference. So yeah, I'll check in again later. Here's from the South Downs. So I'm hacking up another great big hill behind me. I'm now 30 something miles in, 5 hours, 20 minutes so far. Running really well. The shoes are fine. I found them really comfortable. There's been a real mix of terrains in this actually. There's been long stretches of road. There's been long stretches of kind of rooted, muddy bits. I'm now yomping up like a grassy bank. There's some steep downs with loose kind of stones. So it's been a bit slippy. You know, there's been a few times actually when my grip has slipped on my foot when I'm moving up a hill, spun my legs. The only other thing I've got to say, really, generally comfortable, apart from one thing I've noticed, I can't say for sure if it's the shoes or if it's what's going on with my feet, but both my toenails have sort of lifted a little bit. They've caught, when I'm running downhill, it's not like they're catching the top of the shoe. It's a bit of a weird feeling. It's like the shoe is bent a little bit and I can just feel my big toenails lifting sort of slightly uncomfortably. That's a new thing on me. I've never had that before. So to say, it's not very pleasant, but yeah, 20 miles to go, and everything else with the shoes is great. I've loved them. So let's just get up to the top of this hill. So another little snippet from me. I haven't done as many as I wanted to. I'm sorry guys on the review here. I was going to shoot a lot more footage of the shoes whilst I ran and the wonderful scenery that's around me. But to be honest, I've not really been 55 miles fit and able to do the camera work. So you're getting a couple of updates from me. But we've got about 4.5 miles to go. I'm just sorting up down how the shoes have held up over those 50 odd miles. They've run like a dream over most of the terrain. They've soaked up everything from tree roots to pebbles to most of the mud. One thing I will say on there's some steeper downs. This is the first time I've taken on some of the sort of steeper descents that you might get on the South Downs here. And they've been a bit, on some of the sort of chalky, muddy stuff, they've been a little bit slippy. The grip wasn't quite there on some of those steeper descents. It rained a couple of days ago, so it's a bit sort of wet on the top mud. The other big thing I've noticed is they keep lifting my toes. On my toenails occasionally are getting caught on something at the front of each of the shoes and it's sort of lifting my big toenails, which is a very, very unpleasant feeling. It's not happening a lot. It happens sort of a little bit when you're going downhill. It's not like my feet are batting into the top of the toe box or the end of the toe box. It's just something's catching. I think I'm going to have a look when I get back and see if the inside of the toe box has a separate piece to see if that's what's doing it. Yeah, I've never had that before in shoes, but it's not entirely pleasant. Other than that, they've run really well. The cushioning's been great. They've coped brilliantly with sort of the mixed terrain that I've been facing here. So compacted kind of stones, lots of road sections, you know, through fields, all of that. The only bit they struggled with was sort of some of the steep sort of slippery bits. But I don't know whether, you know, most shoes would have struggled with those kind of conditions just because of what's happened with the weather the last few days. But yeah, anyway, I better stop rabbling. I've got another 4.5 miles to run. Go and get the medal. So yeah, I'll get on with it and do a final kind of summary at the end in front of Winchester Cathedral, which is a treat for you all coming on the way. So it's the morning after the race. I had wanted to do this sort of sum up at the end of the race, but I'm not going to lie, after very little training, running 56 miles takes a little more out of you than you might think, or at least more than I'd hoped. So by the time I hit Winchester Cathedral, I plonked on a chair. I was feeling a little bit wobbly for the last mile. Weirdly, with a mile to go, I ended up sitting in a church, sitting in church grounds on a bench, trying to gather myself so I wasn't too wobbly going into the finish. That's how together I was. So I wasn't going to be making any sense. But anyway, so now here we are, the morning after I ran 56 miles in the inov-8 TrailFly G300s. And my thoughts on these shoes, basically after doing that's the longest I've gone. I was out for 10 hours 15 on the feet. And these shoes, as I said along the way, I think performed remarkably well. The cushioning ate up all kinds of different terrain. You know, I'm not talking about big heavy rocks. I'm not talking about particularly kind of steep descents. Again, that's a caveat here. We're in the UK. There were some decent descents, but we're not talking like mountain switchbacks and all those kind of things that you'll find in more kind of severe locations. But it was a bit muddy. It was a bit slippy. On the way down, you did get to test a little bit more about how the foothold was in these shoes. And over that long kind of time, I got to really feel how my feet are in this shoe for a really longer run than I did in my initial test. Now, cushioning, they held up well. They ate up all the little stones, all the little tree roots, all the little lumps and bumps. They rolled over that with kind of nice response, nice protection. And they've definitely, compared to something like the TrailFly 270s, sorry, the Terra Ultra 270s, these are a little bit more cushioned and a little bit more protective. So I'm just going to rattle through a few things that I did find that I thought follow on from the other runs that I've done in the review. No hot spots on this, and actually no blisters. My feet this morning are fine. I didn't have any rubbing. I didn't have any hot spots or blisters. Over that kind of distance, that's pretty good. I normally find in all shoes that around here, because of the way my little toe is, I sometimes find that this can be a little bit tight and squish my little toe, and I get a little bit of rubbing. I did get a little bit of that with these shoes, less so than I have done with some Hokas, like the Hoka Torrent. I've done this kind of distance in, even in the Terra Ultra 270s. So there was sort of plenty of space and room in these. On the top of the foot here, a bit later on into the race, when I think my feet maybe had sort of swelled up across the top of my foot, I did find that this lacing down started to pinch a little bit, so I had to do a little bit of readjustment. But you know, you're going to get those kind of things over this kind of distance. You might need to readjust your shoes every now and again when things sort of change. Now, the other big thing that I think I noticed was that on the descents, when the descents got steeper, I had a problem inside the shoe, and I think it's this that's causing it. You can see this kind of reinforcement. Now I'm going to put the shoe down and try and explain why. As I was running down, and your foot is maybe moving sort of more towards the front of the shoe a little bit, even though you've sort of laced down hard, my big toe was raising, and it was catching on the underside of that reinforcement, the toenail, and it sort of felt like it was lifting the toenail. Only really happened on sort of steep descents, or when I kind of put my foot over a stone where the shoe sort of bent around the toes. That was uncomfortable, and it happened on both shoes. So I trimmed my toenails. Everything was sort of sorted before the race, as it would be normally, and I've never really had that. So I got that. That was the problem that I had with the descents. I didn't get my toes butting up against the end of the toe box, which can be a problem in other shoes. You know, when you're sort of going down steep descents, you start to smash your toes into the end of the toe box. I didn't get that with this, but that thing was slightly uncomfortable. I don't know if I could remedy that. It just feels like where my toes are sitting in the shoes, they just seem to catch the underside of that reinforcement. So where the mesh meets the reinforcement. So I don't know whether that'll happen to everyone, is hard for me to say. It definitely happened to me. And I do have another friend who's run in these shoes who did experience a little bit of a problem with black toenails having used the G300s. So they reported that to me. So I don't know. I'll be interested to hear in the comments if you guys have sort of experienced that, if you've run in these shoes. The other thing I will say, on the trail, it was really pleasant to meet someone, Ian Britton, I bumped into, who was sort of sat in a car, I think waiting for someone who was running. He was crewing somebody. But yeah, we stopped and had a little bit of chat, and I sort of talked to him about that. So hello, Ian. It was really nice to sort of see you out there on course. And actually it was nice just to have a little chat and see a friendly face, actually. But yeah, so thanks for that. Really, really good to meet you. Another thing I really wanted to point out was the grip. So you've got this graphene-enhanced grip on the outsole. So I think 4mm lugs they are. There's one particular sort of type of terrain that comes on the South Downs in the UK here, and it's sort of like a chalky sort of stones and sort of chalky mud that sits over these kind of slippy sort of stones. So it is quite a slippy sort of setup there anyway, but there were points when I was doing some of the steeper descents that actually the graphene grip didn't really cope very well. Everywhere else it was fine. And again, I think this is a kind of terrain that most shoes will struggle with, to be honest. It's sort of notoriously quite slippy and difficult, so you have to sort of ease back. But that was something I noticed. There was a couple of times on those steeper descents where I felt myself having to rein back in because I wasn't quite confident that I was going to get that kind of secure footing on those sort of steep downs. But I want to hold my hand up here as well and say that my downhill technique is not really necessarily as good as other people's, so perhaps I'm maybe leaning back a bit and accentuating that as well. So I guess my final kind of sum up over the kind of terrain that I ran, which was a bit sort of slippy top surface mud we'd had a bit of rain a couple of days before, not particularly sort of thick and sticky mud, lots of kind of pebbly sort of gravelly paths, a bit of fields with wet grass, you know, some steeper sort of chalky sort of slimier descents, lots and lots of road sections in that. This kind of mixed bag of terrain that you find in some of these kind of ultras that you get in the UK. You know, it's sort of fairly flat. I think we did about 1,500 meters, 4,000 feet of climbing and descending. So we're not talking about huge elevations here. So nothing really hugely steep. But over that kind of mixed terrain, this shoe did really well. It was a really nice shoe to run in. It did the job great over that distance, apart from those sort of few points with the toes. And apart from that sort of minor adjustment, I would happily lace them up again for that kind of run. And I'm thinking about when I might go and do some mountain runs over in Europe. I think I might change. I might not go for that, basically just because of that problem with the toe and the descending. That worries me. It might not happen to everyone, but that would be a worry for me over longer distances. I think I need that will become a problem fairly quickly in terms of sort of hurting the feet over long distances. So that's one thing that over this distance and having done this race test, that is a new consideration for me.